As a kid, I was definitely the get home from school, throw on the Sci-Fi Channel and watch, Star Trek.
I remember my older brother would have the toys on the wall, hanging down from the ceiling on posters on the wall. It was always part of growing up for me.
I'm a big Star Trek fan. It's been a big part of my growing up. It was something that I bonded with my father over.
I've been looking at the spaceships for years, so it was a bit of a dream come true to be able to go and actually make them and put them in a live game.
Working for Star Trek is it's a massive dream come true for a lot of us working here and for me as well.
The incredibly small team that we started with was like 20, 30 people, right? Trying to make and having the ambition to make something extraordinary. It's funny to think back how the game started, how small it really was. You can even just look at the map of Star Trek Fleet Command and it's this little tiny corner that we started with.
I first became involved with Star Trek actually through a prior game that the Digit Studio had called Kings of the Realm. And then conversations evolved between the two companies about potentially doing something with the Star Trek license. And then was actually pretty deeply engaged, flew over to Dublin for a week with a small team from Scopely to engage with their senior leadership. And by the end of that week, we had about a 25-page game design doc that was the foundation for a while for Star Trek. And kind of set off on this journey of building a super satisfying and innovative mobile strategy game.
Well, when we first started discussing the idea of making a Star Trek game, the interesting thing that I remember was that the very first conversations were the idea of making a game that was an army game. Little army units that were going to fight each other on a planet. The big conversation at the time was that doesn't make sense for Star Trek. Star Trek is not an army game. It's a naval game. Is this idea the wrong idea for how to bring Star Trek to life? And which ultimately then led us to where we are now with Star Trek Fleet Command, which is really about what makes the property unique.
I first heard about Fleet Command before it was called Fleet Command from John Van Citters, who has worked at Paramount on the Star Trek franchise for many years. And he mentioned that there was this very exciting mobile game in development, and he asked if I would come on and help the team make sure everything looked and sounded as Star Trek as it could be.
The art team was quite small when we started, and we were a small studio, big opportunity, so we started to hire the best people we could. We were trying to figure out the quality to hit. We really wanted to go the best quality possible. We're talking 6, 7 years ago we started to develop this. Yeah, it was very small, very different than what we have now.
A lot of the early time for the narrative team was on the very start of the game, on the introduction and the tutorial and getting players familiar with what actually was happening, which part of Star Trek they're living in, and trying to make that feel like Star Trek while also teaching a very complex game system was by far the most difficult part of the job for me.
One of the biggest challenges was really just how long will it take to make this game and get it right? The galaxy is limitless in scale. The things you can do are essentially limitless. That's great. It's exciting to talk about. It's exciting to make marketing about. It's ridiculously hard to make. If there's one great challenge that the team ultimately lived up to, it was this idea that the vision of what they wanted to make was much, much bigger than we as a company had ever taken on.
One of the early challenges working on the game was figuring out exactly what the gameplay would be. I think one of the most important innovations was being able to capture that sense of immense space in an area as small as a phone that you can hold in your hand. And many months and hours of hard work went into that, but the designers and the artists and the writers not only succeeded at doing that, but succeeding at a level I don't think any of us dreamed of at the time.
When I joined the team about 1.5 years before launch, we didn't have things like research trees, and the base was still very under construction, even as your base in the game is always under construction. So my second week on the job, I got on a plane, came to Dublin, and spent a week here really meeting everyone that had already been working on the game for a couple years prior, and trying to make the game as ready as possible for launch.
When you're working so long on a game of this size, then it all comes down to launch itself. Not only you have spent a lot of time, not only the game dev team has spent a lot of time, it's also the marketing team that has invested a lot in making sure that this launch goes well. And the problem is you only have one shot. And if it goes wrong, the game goes wrong.
When we were selling the idea to CBS and the Star Trek team about how we wanted to launch this game, part of the marketing plan that we were pitching to CBS was, oh, by the way, before we reveal the game, we want to take over your Twitter feed for a day and have the Klingon High Command take over your Twitter feed and start trolling your fans. CBS, I think at the time, was like, wait, what? What do you want to do exactly? But they actually let us do it.
One of the most epic and phenomenal ads that our team produced, but never released. We just wanted to experiment. We wanted to see whether we're able to go into the humor element or like comedic element and advertise the game this way. So we came up with this ad of a lovely dancing grandma that was just like walking down a little hiking trail, and then we put a Klingon ship that flew past by her and blew her up.
So launch day was super exciting. We were on shift. We had morning, evening, afternoon shift. That was so that we could cover 24 hours just in case anything went wrong. It was on the news, the Irish news, which was like pretty exciting. And then we were all here in the office and there was a camera looking around at us and we just like popped champagne and there was balloons everywhere. And then our lead turned around and goes, okay, back to work. We need to make sure this game stays live. So it was like we had a split second of celebration, but it was surreal, it was exciting, it was emotional. And thinking back, I just can't believe that I was a part of that experience.
The launch came fast, slow build, and then all of a sudden it was here and we were off. I mean, we started to get some great data from the players during soft launch and see some unbelievable retention, unbelievable engagement figures. That was all, really strong indicators that we had something special here. It was stressful, of course. It was one of the most stressful periods in my life.
For any game, you're establishing target numbers based on your competitors. And obviously you are innovating in very specific areas, and you're hoping that those innovations take on actual effects on these target numbers. We did not expect how well it would work for us. A lot of these early numbers that we were seeing were extremely hard to believe. And it turns out that it wasn't a dream. It turns out that it was very real.
There's differences between building a game and shipping it for the first time and operating a game and continuously delivering it to the players. One of the first things you have to figure out is that teams need to think kind of fourth dimensionally, right? At all points in time, you both are running something, shipping something, and building something and thinking about what you're going to do with the next update. And the biggest challenge was getting a team, a relatively small team at the time, to start thinking in that fashion, and start thinking about how are they going to do what they're doing right now while there's something that's going to be coming up in the future.
Content every single month is a really fascinating challenge, because there's a process to it. You always have to launch, you always have to have some good stuff, but you want to be changing up ever so slightly every now and again, make it interesting for the player. You want the ships to look even cooler than when we launched. You want the interactions to be more interesting.
I think one thing I would add to what Ferg said was, at the start we're looking to just find the fun in the game, trying to figure out, well, is it going to be fun if we put this in front of players and put it into their hands? Are they going to come back to it? Are they going to really enjoy the universe that we're making?
The game's evolved a lot. When I first started, our updates might be 5 missions and an officer. Now we're doing regular, brand new large features for the players. We've got 20, 30 missions in every single update. We've got arcs, we've got access to the full Star Trek IP. We've got a team in LA, we've got the team in Dublin, Barcelona. Being able to bring together all of those game makers and to be able to create this experience for our players is such a massive undertaking, and it's one that never stops.
In the last 5 years, how we've evolved very much in kind of how we do things and how we deliver things is very much focusing on the why. What we're delivering on the feature side shouldn't just be mechanics, it should also have that kind of element of, you know, what's the story, what's the lore. So to give an example, when we launched Territory Capture, that's not just territory capture, go take over these areas of space. It's origin space. There's theming around it. There's like a lot of love put into those embassy screens, right, in terms of creating that lore.
One of the favorite features that we've worked on over the last 4 years would probably be the territory capture feature. It was one of the biggest updates that we've ever done. A lot of collaboration between different teams, both here in Dublin, out in LA, implementing massive PvP battles that people are, waging war across different systems, taking ownership.
One of my favorite features that I got to work on was Infinite Incursions, which went live last year. Before it even came out, we actually did a roadmap update to the players. And one of the best things was that there was a very fun YouTube comment that essentially went, "There's no way engineers in Scopely can pull this off." We thought, bring it on.
One of the things I really loved working on was the Romulan Deredex ship. That was a ship that I had a toy of for years and years and years sitting on my desk, and the chance to actually get to make that and put it in the game was so cool, and I've got it as my screensaver now.
So for me personally, one of the things that I really enjoy is the diversity in what I get to do. I don't only get to work with the incredible developers and the artists that work within Digit, I also get to work a lot with Paramount and make sure that we actually honor the IP and the franchise that we're working within. Having the narrative team, for instance, being able to write something that has become lore and canon within the Star Trek franchise and IP is just amazing.
In terms of the relationship with Paramount, it's been truly exceptional. It's really important to us that we've all felt like this is our game, and to have that, to hear that from them has been very satisfying to us.
We continue to build Star Trek Fleet Command in every way. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know everywhere that it's gonna go. We have more good ideas than we ever have time to implement. And that's why we're gonna need years to bring all those good ideas to light.
Star Trek Fleet Command has a really bright and exciting future. We've got exciting new technology coming down to bring players together in brand new ways. Exciting types of combat, but also some other big things in the next couple months that are gonna be even more exciting cross-server gameplay.
I think the game has proven its ability to adapt as new iterations of Star Trek come along. Even though we started with the Kelvinverse movies and those characters, we've been able to introduce so many of the other beloved icons that have appeared down through the years. And there's so much cool Star Trek stuff on the horizon.
If there is one thing I could say to our fans is thank you so much for being a part of this amazing journey that has lasted for 5 years already. You're making this game better. We're trying really hard to create a unique experience for you, but in reality, you're creating this experience within the game itself.
To the fans, I'd just like to thank them so much for supporting the game, giving us some great feedback, even though necessarily we don't want to hear the bad feedback, but we actually love it, we listen to it, and hopefully we're improving all the time.
Please continue to be hypercritical of the experience. That's going to help us grow as game makers. It's going to help us improve the experience of Star Trek Fleet Command. There's a lot of people who work really hard every day, every month to bring Star Trek Fleet Command to life. You definitely have a role to play in that and helping us make the best game we can.
We get to tell great Star Trek stories every day, but the real story is yours, and we love being on that journey with you.
If it isn't for the players, we wouldn't have, I suppose, the feedback, the drive, the motivation to kind of do what we do. We love what we do, and we love that you help us make it better.
I think the biggest thing that makes Fleet Command unique is the community of fans that are playing the game. After the original series ended, it was the fans that kept Star Trek alive and ultimately convinced the studio to bring it back. And that same love and energy is obvious in the fans of our game. They keep it alive.
I think the community cares so much, and they're so committed, and they're so passionate because they're loyal Star Trek fans. And I think that having that connection outside of game and bringing it into game is kind of like what really keeps that fuel going.
It's a very emotional experience.
Yeah.
Even if someone who is playing Star Trek Fleet Command isn't like a diehard Star Trek fan, it's the relationships and the bonds they've made since coming into Star Trek Fleet Command, because it's a very, very social game.
It's an amazing ride that we've been on together, and we're looking forward to so much more. We have new adventures to tell, new features and content to explore with you, and I hope you'll come along on this amazing journey.